In this video, we will see how we can configure the masters that are required for the payroll processing in OneHash. The first thing that is required for processing payroll is to create a payroll period. We can go to the payroll and create a payroll period. The payroll period helps us to define the complete tax deduction and from which date to which date our taxes are applicable. All the tax calculation will be done based on the payroll period and all the income tax regulation, and the proof submission needs to be done against the payroll period. Once we have created the payroll period, the next thing that we require is to configure the masters required for the salary. The first thing is creating the required salary component. OneHash comes with the flexibility to create as many salary components as you want. On every salary component, you get an option to define whether it is a type of deduction or income. You can write their description and further categorize them based on various tax components, payment dates, etc. The variation of the amount depends on the total payable days. If we define it, then it will be categorized under taxes. Variables based on the taxable salary sometimes require components like TDS or income tax, which depends on the net taxable income. We can also define that according to the exemption from the income tax. If it is being checked, then the full amount that is being calculated for this particular component will not fall under tax calculation. If you want to round the total, whenever it's been calculated, that is also possible. The statistical component helps us in defining some intermediary components that we can further use for the calculation of other components. If we do not include it in total, it won't be calculated into the gross earning or the gross total that is being given. If you have disabled it, then this component cannot be used in any salary structure. For this particular company and the company under this account head, this component should be added or calculated. In case we do not define it, then it comes under the default payroll account. If this is a component that requires calculation based on some other parameters, then we can do that. In case it is based on a certain formula, we tick mark it and define the formula. In this condition, we can define the circumstances under which this component needs to be added. If that particular condition satisfies, then only this component will be applicable in the salary structure. For example, sometimes we are required to give a strategy bonus that is applicable only when your basic salary is below $21,000. So in such a condition, we can define our basic to be less than $21,000. This way, we can set the condition that when this particular component will be applicable. Even if a component is being added, that value won't be calculated. Similarly, we can define it for other components. For basic salary, we define the abbreviation as B. For all other calculations, you will be using B as a variable for the calculation purpose. We can take the reference and according to that, we can apply the formula. Generally, if we have a basic of 40%, so we can set a formula that it will be 40% of the base salary of that particular employee. The gross monthly salary is referred to, and we can simply apply the formula. For 40%, we need to multiply it by 0.4, based on the given formula. Now we come to another component that is HRA. Generally, we have 40% or 50% of the basic salary, and we can set the formula. We use the abbreviation B for the basic, so we would be calculating 40% of the basic. Wherever it is 50%, we can multiply it by 0.5. Now let's say we want to create other allowances as a component. The other allowances should be based on the formula, and it should be the gross monthly salary minus the basic salary, minus the HRA. So this way we can set various components that are required. Sometimes we require some components which have flexible amounts that need to be created in a particular duration. You can take the example of the travel allowances or medical allowances every year for which we can create live travel allowances. It is an earning component. It's a complete taxable component, and it is a flexible benefit. So how much maximum benefit can we give? Let's say we allow a user max capacity of $30,000 per year, and you can set it against the benefit claim. The user needs to claim this flexible benefit. Whenever we are doing this, the tax impact cannot claim this benefit because it is part of the taxable income. Sometimes we have some component that is being paid in another form, and users should not be able to claim it, and this component should also be part of the taxable income. We can tick mark it. Whenever we are doing the payment, a separate payment entry also needs to be created when we are releasing the payments. In cases like these, we can use it. Whenever we'll be paying, then a separate payment entry will also be required. We can select an existing account head, or we can create a new one, under whichever this account should be the account head. OneHash provides us the flexibility to set the payroll components as per our need. We can use these flexible options to configure the basic salary components and their calculations. When this particular part is completed, then the next step comes in creating the salary structure. So salary structure is a format where we define all applicable components, deductions, and earnings. Let's say we name it Standard Non-Metro India. Or you can name it according to the grid or the designation that you are following. We can also select the payroll frequency for this structure based on the timesheet. Although for the standard one, we do not require it to be based on the timesheet. If we want it to be based on timesheets, we can do that as well. The question is, what will be the maximum amount per day when we are doing the leave encashment? Whenever we are doing leave encashment, we pick the amount for the leave encashment from here. What is the maximum benefit of the encashment that can be given? If you want to cap it, we can cap it, or we can add all the components. Here filter is applied for the earning type of component, so components are not visible here. Let's recheck our salary components. Since we have not added the company under which it is applicable, hence it isn't visible. Let's configure it. In the case of a multi-company setup, we can use the same salary component. We can add these rows and configure the account heads for other companies as well. Now the remaining components will also be visible. When it is selected, the formula will be automatically picked. If we have configured it into the component, we can use it. In case you want to do some modifications in this formula, that can also be done. In the case of deductions, we can select the deductions. What will be the default mode of payment? We can select from which account it will be payable. If you don't specify the account details here, it needs to be defined in the payroll while we are doing the payroll processing. The current formula that is used is standard, for example, for the Maharashtra state, and you can change the condition according to your state requirement. Once we have defined the salary structure, now is the time to submit it, review it, and then we can assign it to multiple employees. Please note, until we do not assign it to any employee, salary structure doesn't calculate the salary. Sometimes we try to create a salary slip directly after creating the salary structure. It won't be allowed as the user is not assigned to any salary structure. In the salary structure, we have just defined the components, earning components, deduction, the applicable conditions, and the calculations that can be done. The next step is we need to assign the salary structure to the employee. We can do it based on the grade. We can filter out the users, select the particular employee, and we can assign the salary structure to the individual. In case you want to do it for the group, we can apply the relevant filters. Based on that, we can do the assignment from which date the salary structure is effective for that particular user. We can select and define the base amount here. It is the base that we have used in calculation for the basic, which is 40%, is picked here. So let's say $50,000 is the base salary for a particular employee. In case some variable is there, we can define it. These bases and variables are the fields that we can use for calculation purposes. The final salary calculation will be done based on the components we have used and the calculation that we have considered for that. In the case of the multiple text lab, we can define the text lab and assign it to a particular user. So tax calculation will be done based on that. Once we assign the salary structure, then we can preview the salary slip for that particular employee. We can see how the calculation will be done. Based on the earnings that we have used, it has taken the complete month into consideration. In all the working days, this preview is without considering the attendance part. In case we want to do the attendance part, we can see that 40% of the basic is calculated, HRA is calculated, other allowances are calculated. These things can be calculated in the payroll settings. Now we'll see how attendance will be affecting the payroll. Before that, let's first finish the complete cycle about how payroll processing works and how we can add the remaining obligations and conditions into it. Once we have assigned the salary structure, the next thing we need to do is we need to process the payroll. Payroll processing is done from the payroll entry. In payroll entry, we can add the new payroll entry. We can select the frequency on which date we are processing the payroll. We can select the posting date in case we are posting the salary of the past month. We can select the posting date as the date on which that salary processing was done. From here, we can filter out the employees. If you want to process it for the limited employee, we can save it, and then we click on to the Get Employee. All the employees having the same structure will be automatically pulled out. When we clicked, we saw that we had only one person who was assigned a valid salary structure. In case we wanted to validate the attendance, we can see that attendance is not being marked. If you process the payroll, then it will calculate the full salary for the person due to the setting that is defined in the payroll and attendance. In case you want to detect the full tax exemptions and get complete benefit, that is generally done in the last month of the payroll. For the processing for a particular project, we can select that project, and the cost will be booked under that particular project. Whichever payroll entry that should be booked can be selected from here. From this account, this payroll needs to be processed, and we can select from which bank account transactions will be processed. Once all the details are finalized, we get the option of creating the salary slips. Once we click, it generates the salary slips in the draft mode. We can click on the draft to preview the salary slips we have generated. We can access it in the report view as well. We can switch to the salary register report where we can see and change the filter from which date to which default filter. When we click on the draft, we see that for this period and this company we are getting the complete salary register. We can filter this salary register based on the employee as well, like how many payments are applicable, how many leaves without pay are applicable, basic HRA. So all this gross pay, complete deduction, and the net pay will be visible. It is a report that can be used, and we can see the complete salary register. Once we are final with all the things, we can submit the payroll. Once we submit the salary slips, all the salary slips are generated from here. We get the option of making the bank entry to post a general entry. Once you click to make a general entry, it will create the general entry from which bank account we have paid, and for which account the amount is to be debited or credited. So a general entry will be passed for the entire payroll. We can specify the reference number according to whatever UTR number we have received from the bank. After submitting the payroll, we can select the date on which this transaction should be done, and we can click on Submit. Hence, this will book the transaction for the salary transfer, and it will be visible into the ledger. We can see on which payroll posting date this transaction has been posted. In Payroll, we can see the other reports, like the bank remittance report, and we can use the bank remittance report according to our needs. Based on the account number and the payment details we have for that particular user, we can view their bank remittance report. For this information to be visible, we are required to define the bank account details and the mode of transfer for the employee edge. We can select the salary mode as a bank, and we can define the bank account details. So for all bank account related transactions that have happened in the salary slip, it will be visible to us here. Thank you.